Has Joe Biden created a crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border? Record numbers of migrants are trying to enter the United States, but is that really down to the president's policies? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the surge on the U.S.-Mexico border. Now, when Joe Biden became president, he set out to reverse most of his predecessor's policies, and top of his agenda was immigration reform. Out went Trump's tough stance, and in came what the Biden administration considered a more humane approach. But now, hundreds of thousands have arrived at the U.S.-Mexico border, and authorities are struggling to cope. In March alone, more than 170,000 migrants attempted to enter the United States. Most have been turned away, but not unaccompanied children. They've been allowed in, though finding a place to house them is a serious challenge. So why are we seeing such a surge in numbers? Well, the Republicans blame Biden's border policies, but is it really that simple? We'll discuss that in a moment, but first, Natalie Pohonen has this report.
After day turns tonight on this part of the Rio Grande, the people smugglers get to work, ferrying asylum seekers and migrants from Mexico to Texas. Smuggler Tucci says, "Tell the Border Patrol not to pierce the boat. We're carrying children. The river is deep and we've already removed their life vests." This is happening every night. Many of those making the journey are from Central America. Some will be allowed to stay and seek asylum. The rest are turned back to Mexico. Most of them are being expelled under the Trump-era COVID-19 health order known as Title 42. It allows undocumented migrants to be turned away to prevent the spread of the coronavirus in holding facilities. But there's one key difference between how the old and new administrations apply it. Under Biden, unaccompanied children are exempt. It's seen as a more compassionate policy than that of his predecessor. But it leaves open the possibility of situations like this. Two small figures drop down the side of a 4-meter-high fence. They're Ecuadorian girls, aged just 3 and 5. Left on the American side of the border, they're now in the custody of US authorities. Just 2 of the unaccompanied minors on American soil. In March, US authorities caught more than 171,000 migrants at the US-Mexico border, the highest number of people in about 2 decades. Among those who arrived that month were about 19,000 unaccompanied minors. They're being housed in places like this. It's a border facility for migrant children in Texas. It has capacity for 250, but when the media was allowed to visit in late March, more than 4,000 people were being held here. The system is being overwhelmed.
We're starting to see younger and younger kids being brought over by their sponsors, by relatives, by grandparents, wherever it is in the family that is actually asking for these kids and paying the fees to smuggle these kids into the country.
Joe Biden says it's not because of his nice guy image that people are attempting to cross.
It happens every single solitary year. There is a significant increase in the number of people coming to the border in the winter months of January, February, March.
He's tasked his Vice President, Kamala Harris, with stemming the flow of migrants coming to America's southern border, with a focus on people from countries in the so-called Northern Triangle, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador.
And I started to deal with it back when I was United States Vice President, putting together a bipartisan plan of over $700 million to do with the root causes of why people are leaving. What did Trump do? He eliminated that funding. He didn't use it.
Migration along the US-Mexico border is a perennial issue. It's also a highly politicized one. Donald Trump's presidency was in part defined by his hardline immigration stance. It's one that proved popular in the politically divided states of America. Biden's critics argue that his policies have resulted in the surge of illegal immigration.
It's hard to not feel like this is a type of invasion, one that's being enabled by our own government, quite tragically. And these are not just policies from the Trump administration that they're flouting and that they're undoing.
Many of the people trying to reach the US are attempting to escape deteriorating security situations and poverty. 20-year-old Cristian Nunez is a Honduran graphic artist. He couldn't find work, so joined this human caravan heading to the US. God knows our purpose and what our needs are, he says. I know the governments of today, I know the borders are closed, and we are just boldly going out there. The odds of making it aren't high, but his circumstances at home haven't changed. So like thousands of others before him this year and in years gone by, the march north goes on. Natalie Pohanen, The Newsmakers.
Okay, let's get straight to our panel now. And joining me from Washington is Chris Boian, spokesperson for the UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Agency. From Albuquerque, New Mexico, Mike Vigil, former Chief of International Operations for the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA. And from New York, we have Joseph Pinion, a conservative political commentator and TV host. Thanks all so much for being with us. Joseph, I'll start with you because although this is not a new problem, you point the finger squarely at the Biden administration for this current crisis. He's only been in office less than 100 days, so why is it his fault?
Well, look, let's be very clear. We're not engaging in intellectual, honest conversations when we ignore the fact that one of the principal things that President Biden did when he took office was undo many of the immigration policies put in place by President Trump. And so it is not a coincidence that we go from having 36,000 people coming across the border in February of 2020 to over 100,000 people in February of 2021. It's not a coincidence that as a direct result of that policy, we have three times as many children in detention facilities today as you did underneath President Trump. And so, again, yes, we should talk about the humanity of these individuals who want to come to this country, who are trying to escape the ravages of poverty and despair and abuse. But promising people something that we cannot provide them is just, if not more abusive than what they've already gone through. This is a tragedy of epic proportions. You have children who are coming here. They're being subject to sex trafficking. The women who are coming here falling into, basically being sex trafficked as well. So this is a real humanitarian crisis. But the notion that somehow what Biden doing is of greater humanitarian effort than what happened to President Trump in many ways ignores the unintended consequences of what President Biden has done in his first 100 days.
Okay, Mike, there is a level of compassion in what Joseph said there, which we don't often hear from conservatives, to be quite honest. But still, do you see this as political scapegoating?
Well, I do, simply because under Donald Trump, he created systematic racism and inhumanity. In 2014, for example, we had the Obama administration that had a certain problem at the southwest border, and he created a policy where some of these immigrant youth could apply for asylum in the United States and remain in their countries. Well, what happened next is history. Trump comes into the presidency, and his twin objectives are to do away with anything that had the Obama stamp to it, or worse, anything that would help foreigners. So he rolled this policy out the window, and that started to create a situation where youth from the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, started to come through Mexico into the United States. And at that time, Trump basically created an inhumane policy separating children from their families. To date, there's 545 children that they cannot account for. And what he was doing is expelling these children into Mexico, into the hands of the Mexican cartels that put them into forced labor, into the sex trade. So this situation at the southwest border started under Donald Trump, and it was actually a crisis even before Joe Biden took over the presidency. So to say that the Donald Trump policies worked and were humane is absolutely insane.
Okay, Mike, I want to pick up on some of your points there, but quickly, Joseph, I did see you rolling your eyes, so go ahead.
I mean, look, there are plenty of conversations to be had. If people think President Trump is a terrible president, that's their opinion. If people think that President Trump's immigration policies are worse than President Obama's immigration policies, that is your right. The great thing about America is I don't get to tell you what to believe, but I do get to demand that you be consistent. When we're talking about what we are facing today, the question is not whether you thought that some of the decisions that President Trump made were not the best. The question is the surge that we are seeing, the over 100,000 people that crossed the border in the month of February or attempted to cross the border, the 3+ influx of young people that's happening right now. Is that a result of the policies that Joe Biden put, or is that a result of the policies that Donald Trump put in place? And the answer has to be, it cannot be a result of the policies put in place by Donald Trump, because the policies that were put in place by Donald Trump have been unwound. So look, I understand that there is a long tail in politics and in policy, that the policies that we pass today don't always present themselves tomorrow. But the same people that spent 3 years saying that the robust growth in the economy had nothing to do with the Trump administration and everything to do with the previous administration, now saying that less than 100 days in, when they've undone the immigration policies of the predecessor, that has nothing to do with the surge that we're seeing at the border, the actual human lives coming here. That's just not, we have to be able to have an intellectually honest conversation if we're going to actually figure out how we can help the people who are trying to come here.
Mike, quickly, a very quick response, because I want to bring Chris into the conversation. Go ahead.
Exactly. Is the thing is that we have to be humane in our treatment of these individuals that are fleeing their country because of poverty, inequality, political instability, and then also violence. And we created a lot of that situation in the Northern Triangle by deporting MS-13 individuals that have created a lot of the violence that is currently being suffered by these individuals. So to say that the policies of Donald Trump, which was to make America white because his immigration policies were so racist, and for an African American to be supporting those policies is, to me, quite astonishing.
Okay,
Look,
Chris.
to be clear quickly, just briefly, just because if we're going to go there, first, respectfully, you don't get to tell me how to be a black person. Second of all, it's not a matter of supporting the policies. The question before us was, quite honestly, who was responsible for the issues at the border? That was the extent of the question. Are there things I disagree with President Trump on? Yes, but that's not the question. And when, again, you talk about having humanity for those individuals, we have to have humanity for them. I think I've expressed that multiple times in this conversation alone, and many conservatives have. But the fact remains, at the end of the day, you talking about policies that were passed 3 years ago have very little to do or dealing with the fact that America has contributed to the issues in the triangle. Of course, America has contributed to the issue in the triangle. That does not in and of itself explain the problem that we're facing today.
Okay.
They're two different conversations.
Okay. Joseph, Mike, you know what? we're running out of time, and I really want to bring Chris into this conversation, because Chris, I want to get your opinion on the exchange you just heard there. And also, if you can, help us understand why we are seeing this desperation. What is driving these thousands of people to make this horrible journey, and to send children, their own children, unaccompanied?
Thank you very much, Andre. Yes, it was gratifying, really, to hear the two other panelists talk about the essential need to be humane, and to assist some of the individuals whose lives really depend on getting protection, on reaching safe ground and being protected from the life-threatening circumstances that they are fleeing. And that is what my organization, the UN Refugee Agency, is focused on. We're looking at the southern U.S. border in this case, and we would say that, the United States, like all countries in the world, has an obligation and a responsibility, really, to manage its own borders and to know who is crossing those. Nobody really disputes that. And what we're looking at on the southern U.S. border is what we would call a mixed flow. That is to say, there are lots of people on the move in this region for a wide variety of reasons, and frankly, coming from a wide variety of places. What the UN Refugee Agency is focused on in particular is that essential right to asylum, the right of every human being fleeing war, conflict, persecution, to be able to reach safe ground and to be heard and to make their case for asylum. And that's what we're talking about now. That's what we're seeing at the southern US border. Our focus is very much on the women, men, boys, girls, entire families who are in that circumstance. We are supporting the government of the United States, the government of Mexico, and frankly, all governments in the world that are taking the steps required in the current context, in the current circumstances, to make sure that those specific individuals are identified from the larger groups of people on the move, that they are identified and that they are given access to the protection and the assistance that they need and that they are entitled to.
But I mean, you have to be honest, because this is the problem you really are alluding to, in as far as, some Americans are concerned, is that among those thousands of very good, women, men, and children, there are some dangerous people among them who are absolutely not entitled to seek asylum in the United States. If you can, Chris, please give us a real idea of what proportion they are, those that are not worthy of the asylum status. And I mean, how do you keep them out when there is such a huge surge while allowing those who are worthy of asylum actually into the country, to the effect that Americans do not have to worry that criminals are being able to cross the border in a way that politicians like Donald Trump, for example, can exploit?
Well, of course, and nobody suggests that criminals or anybody that poses any kind of security risk should be allowed to cross any border or is entitled to any kind of protection of that nature. What we're talking about really is supporting governments in building the capacity and making sure that they have the capacity, both physical infrastructure, personnel, expertise, and processes for making those distinctions. Preserving the right for individuals to access territory and be able to make a claim for protection or asylum does not prejudge the outcome of that claim. Those are, of course, claims that are adjudicated in the case of the United States, that are adjudicated by U.S. asylum officers. And so those stories are heard and those cases are weighed, but it's about the capacity to identify those individuals who are entitled to asylum and who need it, and those who are not. That's part of the process as well. So our role is to support governments in putting the pieces in place necessary to be able to make those kinds of distinctions.
Mike, I have to ask you this then, because you were alluding to this in your previous response, in the question that has the United States been really addressing the wrong end of the problem here by looking at dealing with things at the border rather than in these home countries where the problem originated and where the United States needs to take some responsibility for?
Absolutely, and I agree with the gentleman that just spoke. I think that we have to look at the root causes. We have the push-pull policies of immigration that we have to address if we're going to have an impact. And we look at El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, and we have to look at developing the infrastructure there, the capabilities of the military, the police, the security forces, the judiciary, and be able to look at creating jobs there that would prevent them from seeking a better way of life here in the United States. And the problem there is that Donald Trump, when he became president, removed the funding to those countries, aggravating the situation. But we do have to look at the root causes of these countries. And one of the things that Donald Trump did is he pressured the Mexican president, López Obrador, to take away security forces in the thousands to address the caravans coming from Central America, which created a bigger problem in Mexico in dealing with the violent drug trafficking cartels.
Mike, very quickly, do you think Kamala Harris taking the lead on this will help, discover the root causes and be able to fix that? Are you encouraged by her appointment?
I am encouraged by the Biden administration. I'm encouraged by Kamala Harris going into the Northern Triangle and coming up with solutions, working with those countries to address the situation with in terms of undocumented migrants who put their lives at risk going through Mexico and falling into the hands of the drug trafficking cartels. So the Biden administration, if anything, can be accused of doing the right thing and moving away from the horrible, horrible, inhumane tactics of the Donald Trump administration, and how anybody can justify Donald Trump's tactics in dealing with immigration and building a racist wall that is absolutely absurd. I think that we can now move forward with the Biden presidency.
I mean, Joseph, would you agree at least that the United States could be better off investing maybe more in community building back in Central America in particular, rather than investing so much in the response to when these migrants do arrive on the border? Mike was saying that Trump had actually revoked some of the funding that was set out to really try and do that. Would you agree that it might be better invested back in Central American communities?
I think that we can 100% do a better job of starting at the root cause of the issue, which is the fact that we have pain and destruction at the heart of many of these communities, lack of opportunities, lack of fiscal mobility. Of course, we can do a better job. But just back to my original point, that was not the question that we were here to discuss. The question that we were here to discuss is what is causing this surge that we are seeing at the border. And I think that we just have to be honest about what is occurring. My colleagues talking about humanity, what we are seeing at the border right now is inhumane. I mean, this brings me back to almost when we go back to Guantanamo Bay, where the Obama administration promised the American people that we were going to close Guantanamo Bay. And of course, that did not occur. And so it's almost very similar, except for the fact that not only did we not threaten, did we say we were going to close Guantanamo Bay, but now we're bringing more people into this new immigration-style Guantanamo Bay. Those children are packed in like sardines. There's nothing humane about that. These women are being brought here under false auspices to be sex trafficked. There's nothing humane about that. So I think if we're going to focus on the humanity of the people coming here, great. I want to do that. Let's 100% do that. But to sit here and in a vacuum declare any and everything that President Trump did racist just does not make any sense, because the vast majority of people that come to this country legally are brown people, are minorities. The vast majority of the people that are seeking to come to this country are doing so out of a sincere desire to live the American dream. But we cannot provide the American dream to everybody. And we also can't provide the American dream to the people we've already promised it to if we don't set up processes that actually account for the limitations of the infrastructure that allow us to do exactly what Mike has said and what other people have said, which is to try to determine who are the people who have a credible fear and who are the people that would be best trying to get in line, because there's currently a line filled with people facing those same threats who've tried to do this the right way.
Mike, a quick response.
Yeah, the quick response is that, yes, we have to deal with the humanity and humane policies. But the fact is, to ignore the root causes of what is driving the undocumented migrants is totally ignorant. And the fact is that in 1990, the U.S. economy is basically based on a lot of migrants who come here, and they deal with agriculture, they deal with services-related industries such as restaurants, housekeeping, and then also construction. So, to say that the Trump policies worked, that is completely ridiculous.
We're down to our last minute. Chris, I need to ask you this. I mean, is there a good way to ever manage this kind of massive influx? Could any country have really been prepared for the types of numbers that the United States is now seeing on its border and manage it in a way that could be considered completely humane?
Yes, of course there is a good way. I was very, very gratified to hear all three of us, I think, agree in talking about the importance of addressing root causes. And in that respect, the United Nations and a number of countries in the world have come together to look at new ideas. The essential thing that needs to happen really is bringing the humanitarian sector, organizations like my own and others that are dealing with humanitarian concerns, together with the development sector, the investment sector, and bringing those two generally siloed pieces together to address the root causes. And if those are addressed adequately and thoroughly, this will be enough to prevent people from having to flee their own countries in the first place. And I would just like to say that, you mentioned, can the United States do this? And the United States is one of the countries in the region, but as my organization has been saying for a number of years, this is a regional challenge, and it requires a coordinated, coherent regional response with all of the countries that are implicated in this working together to address those root causes. That really is the answer. And everything else we're talking about are solutions. And as Mr. Pinion mentioned, putting in place processes, capacity to deal with the immediate situation. But the long-term real solution is addressing those root causes in a serious and coordinated way.
Chris, we will have to wrap it there. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us on this edition of The Newsmakers. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thanks to our viewers, of course, for tuning in as well. See you next time.